Hey, is she watching like Teen Beach 2? If we got that on the background, that would be tough. Can we shut that door? Thank you. Okay. On that note,
yes,
we are coming up on the, it's great that I'm losing track, 5th or 6th guest here on Shooting the Shot. We had Will Ferrell, Carlos, Nash, Jaime, and then this would be Jon Weinbach, 5. And then we've already got the 6th one lined up. So
yeah,
we're cruising at this point, and I'm really excited about this guest, Jon Weinbach, producer, filmmaker, writer, TV personality, host. I want to ask him if how he thinks we're doing here, and all the rage right now is Last Dance, and he produced it.
And clearly, I think everyone in our audience would agree that Jon has been intimate with and intricately responsible for possibly 2 of the finest docu-series ever made. The Last Dance, about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, and We Are LAFC, one of the most viewed original content series in the history of ESPN's ESPN Plus platform. What more can we say?
I'm sure in terms of characters, a Bob Bradley or a Tom Penn or a Carlos Vela are right up there with the best of them. So I'm eager to hear. I've only had a couple conversations with him. He's an Ivy Leaguer, so I think the intellect is going to be there. Maybe he'll drag me up along with both of you guys. UCLA grad myself. I pale in comparison, but we'll see what those Ivy League days are like.
Well, I hope that you took the same precaution I did. I have the thesaurus on the table next, and I'll try and roll out some significant verbiage to impress Jon.
I'm looking forward to this one. He should be hopping on shortly. Here we
go. Here we go. It's on now. Oh yeah, geared up.
I mean, come on.
Love it. I love when the guests show up ready with the proper attire and ready to go.
Wait, hold on. Larry will like this. Hold on. This is the insignia day.
Oh, wow. Look at
4-year-old hat. It's got the stains to prove
I love that the stains are like war wounds. Thanks for joining us. You're the
Nice.
first producer on the show, which is pretty awesome. And unless Jaime, has he produced anything?
Jaime is producing.
Does it count?
Bro. Yeah.
Okay, but he's a veteran producer.
This is true.
I love everything you've done, from the Wall Street's $1 million fantasy league to obviously the Straight Out of LA 30 for 30. And then our personal favorite that we hold dear to our hearts, We Are LAFC, that we're going to get to obviously throughout this conversation. But I just wanted to start it right off the bat. And I know, I don't know if Larry knew I was going to do this, but I just want to cut to it. We know you're a producer, writer, and a TV personality, a host. So between those 3 occupations, what would you start, cut, and bench?
Ooh.
Give it to
start,
us.
cut, and bench. Okay, well, I think I would probably start. Ooh, that's hard. I would start as a writer because that's kind of what I am. Ultimately, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. I start with that just because at the core of anything I do is some piece of written material. And like I still, Larry knows Mike Tolan, my boss, my partner. He's like, he tries to beat the reporter out of me sometimes, but I still sort of default to that. I got to report something out. I got to write something on a piece of paper and have it clear. And whatever I do, whether it's directing something, producing something, if I have to write copy, it still starts with that. And then I would say probably producer director. Each project kind of has its own cadence and rhythm. Sometimes you're doing more producing stuff, which is to say, people always ask me, what does that mean? Like, you're a producer. It feels so cliche to LA. Like, I'm a producer. Make stuff happen. You know, you invent projects, you create them, and then sometimes you direct those. And then on camera host.
We're having a little bit of are you getting that, Larry? A little bit of lag on the internet.
Hold on 1 second. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
My kids are playing a Fortnite tournament in my office right now, which is I don't have the better internet access. But give me 2 seconds here.
Okay. There's a first.
Okay.
There we go.
Love that.
That's Sonny Weinbach in the background on the headphones.
All right.
Oh, perfect. Cameos. Perfect.
Tell us a little bit about how you go from a guy who is with AOL at pretty much the dawn of the commercial internet when we're all getting free discs in the newspaper that are, intended to get us to sign up for and use AOL as our ISP back in the day. How do you end up from there to, co-producing with legendary Hollywood producer, former head of Sony Pictures, the one and only Peter Guber?
So it's a pretty funny story. I joined AOL after I had been at the Wall Street Journal, and then I had done Straight Outta LA, the first 30 for 30 I did. And at the time, AOL was launching, they had, I think, TechCrunch and Daily Finance. And so this is like 2009. Yeah. They were like, okay, we're going to be the Time Life of the digital age. We're going to launch all these content verticals in tech, sports, finance, what have you. And a dear friend of mine who I used to work with at the Wall Street Journal said, hey, there's some interesting stuff happening at AOL. Would you be interested? And so I ended up being sort of like their sports business reporter and LA correspondent. And at the time, I was sort of the only person who did video. And like on the old and so I started like a sports business TV series called The Front Office. We did like interviews with Tim Lewicki and Kathy Carter from MLS days, and
good name drop, John.
Yeah, a whole bunch of people, interesting people. But AOL hired a bunch of great staffers. I mean, the diaspora from that site, Fan House, they're at SI, they're at all New York Times. I mean, a whole bunch of them. And then it sort of just went away. I mean, it really like in 2011 just went away. But the timing was good for me because in 2010, Larry Friedman, what other major sports business transaction took place?
Was that the Golden State Warriors?
That was actually my first dealing with Peter was, I can't even remember what the story was. I think I was looking into doing a story about Mandalay baseball when I was at the Journal. But it never ran. But I ended up covering the sale of the Warriors. And
so was that the headline? What are Joe Lacob and Peter Guber thinking, paying that for an NBA
value? Well, the other thing, of course.
Wait a second. What? How much was it? What was the price at that point?
$4?
I think it was like $5.25.
Yeah, I mean,
really?
It was an astounding number at the time, and not even so much because the Warriors were, people forget the Warriors were like worse than the Clippers. Honestly, they were terrible. I mean, maybe not worse, but they were on par as far as being a poorly run organization. But also the crazy part that Larry knows is that that Peter was bidding against Larry Ellison.
Yeah.
And nobody loses to Larry Ellison when it comes to money. And it was I just remember interviewing Peter and Joe.
Okay.
And it was for AOL and it was funny because it was AOL, people thought, I mean, we had big reach, but it was still kind of like people were figuring out, wait, is this AOL? Is it Fan House? Is this going to run on the website? But Peter was great. But the big thing is that by doing that job, I was able to sort of have credentials to sports media events. And so the whole time I was doing that, I was producing a film called The Other Dream Team about the 1992 Lithuanian Olympic basketball team. And so, and it's got sponsored by the Grateful Dead. And, if you're a basketball fan, Sharunas Marciulionis and Arvydas Sabonis, really great story. Yeah. And so I was able to sort of like moonlight while I was doing that. And we ended up, getting into the Sundance Film Festival, and we got to deal with Lionsgate and Disney. And so we got some acclaim. And about right before Sundance in 2012, I promise I'm coming around here, Larry, on the story, is that Mike Tolan said to me, I'm thinking about launching this new entity with Peter Guber, Mandalay Sports Media, and he was telling me about it, and he had told me about it a year earlier. So I was a little bit skeptical, but I said, look, Mike, if this ever actually happens, like, I'm raising my hand. And so after we got a nice review in Sunday on Variety or Hollywood Reporter, and Mike called in early 2012, he's like, Jon Weinbach, like, want to talk about life, the capital L. And I said, that sounds great. And I went to meet with Peter and Paul Schaefer. And then that's sort of how it came together. And so we've been, I guess we've now almost 8 years, actually more than 8 years, which seems crazy. But that's how I ended up, coming to Mandalay and partnering with Peter and Mike and Paul. And so that's the long, short story.
That is very cool. So Jordan alluded to, the depth of your background and the multitude of projects and the producing credits and the writing credits. And I'm a little baffled because I checked out your IMDb page.
Okay.
And there is no producer or executive producer or director or writing credit. In fact, there's no credit at all listed for one of the best documentaries in the history.
Is that true? Is it not on there?
No. There is no mention of We Are LAFC. So are we embarrassed, John?
But there was a mention, and I was talking to my wife about it, of The Last Dance, and we're like, well of course there's a mention of The Last Dance.
Oh man, by the way, I did not know that. I'm going to change that like right after we get this call, because I will tell you something. I'm very proud of our series. And for those who don't know, it's We Are LAFC, 10 parts on ESPN, about chronicling the team's expansion season. And as you guys know, that was an unusual project because we started it, shall we say, late in the year. And it was a unique one because, well, I don't know if the answer is, it has nothing to do with my feelings about the project. I'm very proud of it. It was fun to do. It's hard to do because I, as a season ticket holder and, friendly with, a lot of the principals and all that kind of stuff. But I felt a responsibility with that project. Really, I care a lot deeply about all the stuff I do, but the Jordan project is massive. But the LAFC project for me was really massive because I'm from LA. I'm a massive soccer fan. I interned at Major League Soccer in its second year.
Wow.
I know a lot of people there, and I used to write about MLS, at the Journal at every opportunity, and almost, feeling like I needed to be part of this effort to mainstream soccer in American landscape. So it has nothing to do with how I feel about the series or the team. I'm going to get that squared away like this afternoon.
So did you approach that whole project from a fan's point of view, from that mentality? Like, what would a fan appreciate coming from, an expansion team that obviously had the ownership group that we did, and then the characters that we did within that group? Did you approach it as like a fan?
All of the above. I mean, I approached it as a fan, as a producer, as a soccer, not what's the best word, evangelist. I mean, I think, but really, I mean, I think that, and I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but I do think that historically MLS, it's been challenging because it's not, it's a younger league. It hasn't had the opportunity both from internally its own resources and externally from networks to like mythologize its own history. And, the smartest thing that the NFL did was they created NFL Films, which they had this in-house myth department, that they could make these players look larger than life. And, frankly, soccer has been behind not just the MLS, the EPL, Bundesliga, La Liga. None of them have that kind of entity like NFL Films has, and now the NBA Entertainment, Major League Baseball. And so I knew that this was this grand experiment in LA. And I talked with Tom and Larry and and Peter and Paul and I would send them emails at every single milestone, breaking ground at the sports arena, hiring Bob, like, we got to be shooting this, we got to be shooting this, we got to be doing this. And, Peter has said it, I'm sure to you, Larry, said it to us, which is like, you don't want to make a story about the thing. Do the thing, then tell the story. And I think, his bigger concern was like, let's get this team off the ground. But Tom obviously is uniquely positioned because he was in the media, and sort of had the vision to like stay in the ESPN's ear about it. And that's kind of really how it happened. I mean, we did a big pitch deck before the season, like, late fall of 2017. We shot with, and it's in the series, we shot with Jon and Bob and Tom in that, Larry was, of course, everyone was in there in that, in the conference center where they were kind of going through strategy, in the sales center, in the experience center. And so it was profoundly disappointing, frankly, that we weren't able to get greenlit before the season. And so then when we got greenlit, really almost 2/3 of the way through, I mean, if you remember, our first day of shooting was before the third Galaxy game in 2018. I mean, that was, I don't know, was it late August? So
yeah, luckily there was enough footage though, right? I mean, there might not have been enough for your liking, but it was actually pretty well documented.
Well,
it's that early stages for an MLS team.
Well, not for just an MLS team, for any team. I mean, Rich and Marcus and all the guys on the LAFC, Seth, and all on the communication side, it's only because you guys had that material. Not just that you had it, that it was shot well, and you captured the moments, like Bob's opening speech to the team, where he asked Carlos to be like Messi. It's only because of that. And I was involved. I even, when the team was starting, I came out and just said, hey, what can I do to help? Because I wanted to help the club do this. And that was really just from a perspective of like, I want to see this team succeed, because I thought the parts were in place in a unique way in this market to succeed. And, I think that's been held to be true.
So how difficult was your job made by the competing visions, the competing interests, the competing opinions, and for the millions and millions of viewers and listeners of Shootin' the Shot? The fact is, you and I got into it on a couple of occasions because I had my own thoughts on how best to tell the story. I know Tom did, Rich did. You had your own ideas. Bob had his ideas.
Bob never had any thoughts on the project or production. It was always saying yes.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, show that, Jon. Show that. Well, and then ESPN and the league had their views, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like to. I mean, look, the Jordan project, in a way, the LAFC project was in a way very good practice for the Jordan project. Obviously, scale of a different magnitude, but in terms of the competing, chefs in the kitchen, and I mean, with the LAFC project, it was almost 5 different viewpoints, because you had the on-field personnel, like that story to tell, and that's like sort of, let's call it, that's Bob's world. Then there's Jon's world, Thorrington and sort of the front office. I'll call that the front office and ownership. And then there's sort of, Larry, you're the sort of the community, which is a big story for LAFC, of how do you create a fan base from zero? Doesn't that story deserve to be told? That's 3 viewpoints. Then there's MLS, 4, ESPN, 5, and then our own team, so 6. I mean, with the Jordan project, you had the NBA, you had the Jordan people, you had ESPN, you had Netflix, Jason, our director, Mandalay, us. So, I mean, you had a lot of that, and it's not easy. I like to think that that's what I do well, is trying to, not make everybody happy, but maybe make everybody equally unhappy. so and be able, and my thing is to be honest. Like I would say, look, I think there are tons of great stories. I'll give you an example. Like Mark Anthony Kaye, right? And Latif, who I love those guys as players and as humans. They're just great, and their stories are great. But for our series, Mark got hurt. And so there was only and he was great about giving us access. There's only so much I could say. And obviously he had an even greater season in 2019. And how great would it have been to follow that? But like, there was only so much I could put him in our show, because he wasn't a name at the time. And it's hard to get that across to the ESPN people to care. And so you're dealing with, MLS already, there's a bar to jump over, unfairly in my opinion, but a bar that, hey, who's going to care about MLS? Okay, then within MLS, who are we going to care about on LAFC? And then within LAFC, who are we going to care about? So it's a challenge for sure. In a way, I think we had the advantage of, we had to get these episodes done to air for March. And also we also had the challenge of, that season ended so
abruptly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I'm saying this as someone who's watched a lot of soccer and a lot of MLS. And I think at various points in 2018, I said, this team's good enough to win, the whole thing. Forget about last year. But and so it was the first time in my life where I have a personal passion, the team as a fan, a professional passion in this project, where it came together, and also personal connections. I had never been this close to a team at every level, players, coaches, organizations, owners. So it was like, I felt it, in a way that I hadn't on a project before.
Did you take some of these lessons from this, 10-part docu-series and apply them to The Last Dance, although it was on a larger scale?
I mean, yes and no. My role is also, every project's a little bit different. On LAFC, I was so involved in every possible part of it, in a way I could never be, and I wasn't in The Last Dance. It's just, Jason was a director. It was different for me because I'm used to doing every interview and, arranging and supervising all the edits. I mean, on this one, thankfully, we had an incredibly capable team. And so my role on The Last Dance was more like, it was kind of nice because I was like, how can I say yes? What can I do to help these guys get there? Is it arranging a crew? Is it, how do we get to this person to an interview? How do I deal with the licensing? Play defense against the NBA, all these various things that, I think the best practice for it was, okay, wow, you've got a lot of stakeholders here who are really invested in seeing this succeed and seeing it succeed on a certain kind of level. And so that was the best practice for it.
So was there anything that got cut from We Are LAFC that you just wish in the depth of your heart actually made it in? Because, for instance, you guys, part of the process was we would get a little sneak peek at not quite finished versions of episodes. And there was that episode where we're in Kansas City. It's the last day of the season. If we win the West. And in a game where, KC goes down a man, unfortunately we find a way to lose. And I'm watching the cut of that episode, and Bob is circling Lee and I think Benny.
It was me. I was there too.
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, great. My esteemed co-host.
It was two or three of us, yeah.
And Bob circles him it felt like a dozen times, and in the first cut of the episode, you guys had that whole scene in there. And I'm like, I think maybe we get the point after the first two.
Yeah.
So, but for you, was there something in particular that you were like, oh my God, this is box office gold, but it didn't make it for whatever reason?
Am I at liberty to say? I don't know. I mean, I think that I should get whatever fee a portion of whatever fee the club got for Andres Horta. Will that answer the question? So we shot. I mean, listen, I think this is no great secret that Andres was very nice to work with from our point of view, and sat down for an interview when it was already kind of the case that things were not going great for him at the club, and he was like a pro. But there was that moment in the Chicago game in 2018 at Chicago where Bob really went after him at halftime. That the show does not feature the full version of that, and I think I felt okay about what was in there. I didn't feel like it was like sanitized. We got the point. It didn't need to be so graphic. And I'll say this, I was joking about Bob, but like I have more than enormous. I mean, it's like a huge amount of not just respect, but like, admiration for him as a person, as a coach. I think you may know this, I went to Yale. Bob was a coach at Princeton. I covered, my freshman year of college, I covered the Yale Princeton game when Jesse Marsh kicked our ass.
No way.
Playing for Princeton.
Harvey, I told you he was going to find a way. These Ivy Leaguers always do. And by the way, I hope you noticed that he used the word diaspora earlier.
Diaspora. Come on.
Like, I went to Boston University. I can't even pronounce the word.
Diaspora. Jordan Harvey is a UCLA guy. Come on.
We talked about opening our thesaurus before this interview just to make sure we understood everything that was going on.
No, but by the way, Bob gave me shit about it. Bob gave me the first day when I came in. Hey, where you went to school? Da, da, da. But Bob is a challenge in terms of he's an intimidating guy based on his aura. He's intense, and all of that is true. But what I really enjoy, it was energizing to be around, is he challenges you. I mean, I know he challenges the players, but even as an interviewer, and he would go back and forth, and he would go back at you, but allow you the opportunity to go back at him. And that's kind of what his, from my amateur, analysis point of view, is like, that's kind of what makes him, is like, he wants that back and forth. And I think he respects it more. And so, for someone who's not a former player or a former coach at an elite level, like I know soccer pretty well, I think, and think I'm pretty educated about certainly this league and the game. And I think he saw that I cared. I think he's the kind of person that if you care, that's what he's really looking for. And I think he can respect the fact that we're just trying to do our job. And he understood that we had a job to do, and that like it kind of wouldn't be great if it was just like a sanitized ad. And so he got that really, really quickly. And so that part was great. I mean, there's not a ton. I mean, I think the league and you guys were really cool about that, and that to give us that trust, considering the insanely expedited timeline.
Right. So 2 last LAFC questions, because I know that Harvey is going to dive deep on the last game. So, and the answer to these 2 questions may actually intersect. But curious about your favorite LAFC moment as a fan, and also if you could share with the audience a little bit about Sad Galaxy Man.
Well, those are well, so I would have told you
intertwined.
I would have told you that the playoff game against the Galaxy last year, it's not just top LAFC moment. I mean, been very fortunate to go to some great, memorable sports fan moments as live. Number one, in 1987, I ran onto the floor after the Lakers beat the Celtics, Game 6, 87 finals. I attended Game 2 of the 88 World Series. Dodgers A's, Oral Hershiser had a 3-hitter and got 3 hits.
Wow.
I went to I'm not just saying this because it's an Ivy League thing, but Yale hockey win the NCAA championship, and that was long after college.
Drink Larry,
every time. And then the LAFC victory over the Galaxy in the playoffs, I would have said was my favorite moment until this year at the CONCACAF Champions League.
Oh, yeah.
That comeback was so awesome. Although I think actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the Galaxy playoff game was more just because it was like exercising these demons and having been to all of the games. I didn't go to the first game against Zlatan at Home Depot, but
you didn't miss anything.
Yeah, that was so thrilling as a game, and then so satisfying, and so it was like it came out of me from a fan's point of view, and knowing how much it meant to the club and to everyone across the club. It was incredible.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the exercising of the demons, because when it happened, and I've since been, we'll call it, backed up by what went on in The Last Dance, I likened it to how Jordan and Pippen and that Bulls team had to climb the mountain and vanquish the bad boy Detroit Pistons.
Yeah.
They had been on the wrong end of it for so long, and sooner or later, if you're going to be a champion, you've got to vanquish your demon.
Isn't it crazy, though, that you're talking about that was the, sixth game between the two teams in 2 years, right? Because they played three times the
first year was 3.
So in 6 games, in 2 years, without a playoff game, there was already that kind of intensity to it, and it's just incredible. And you asked about Sad Galaxy, man. So where we sit, our seats are section 124. We're just to the west side of the goal on the on the non 3252 side, and for whatever reason, and Larry, you got to get on this. The row behind us is always like a random fans of the other team. Like it just seems that way. We sit, in front of us it's all LAFC diehards, but for whatever reason behind us, there's always kind of some randoms. And so that game, there were like 3 Galaxy fans, and they were taunting and the whole thing. I mean, all fine, nothing too bad. But
how many times did they say you can't beat us?
Oh, that, and also, it's like it's central casting, because Zlatan is such a perfect villain, and he's they were effective, and it was just like we got to keep scoring, like we did, and so when Dio scored, was that the 5th goal?
Yeah.
Yes.
So when Dio scored, it was like. Finally, and because remember, right beforehand they had.
I'm getting chills just actually thinking about that feeling, because when it goes 2-2, it's almost like an ominous cloud just comes over, and you're like, not again, not again. And then we obviously go on to push. But yeah, it's just, exercise the demons is like the perfect way of putting it, just because it's just like, thank God we got that off our back. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your story.
It was so thrilling, and it was going back and forth. And as I recall, and I could be wrong, it was 4-3, and
yes,
Galaxy had a free kick, maybe 10 yards outside of the 18, and it was a pretty dangerous ball, and it was like, oh no, and it was like immediate restart, and it was a goal, and the guy behind me who had been just so annoying the whole game, and so I'm lifting up my younger son he's over there. The guy, I don't know what came over me. I just pointed to the guy behind me. I was like, sad Galaxy man. Sad Galaxy man. And
all captured on video.
Sad Galaxy man.
I said, and he flipped us off, and then I sent it to you guys and to Rich, and so they did some editing magic. But it's certainly top, 10. Put it this way. It's certainly top 10 of my lifetime attending events. And the game in the CONCACAF Gold Cup, just this, whatever, it feels like ages ago. It was probably, 2 months ago? It was also incredible. Incredible. So those, when I got the season seats, I sort of did it as, hey, I want to go, and maybe my friend, I can take my dad, my brother, and hopefully introduce my my kids are not as into soccer as I am as a player, but they've gotten really into LAFC. And it's become like a family, tradition. And particularly with my younger son, it like just loves going to the games.
Moving on to what's consuming our lives right now, which is The Last Dance, and the documentary showing Michael Jordan and his reign. Tell us about that. I mean, it's the timing of it was impeccable. I mean, everybody's just craving sports right now, and it came out at such a perfect time. I did a little research, and your director that you were talking about, he wanted it to be like 4 to 6 episodes. Why 10? Why so long?
Yeah, I mean it's
and I didn't know if that had anything to do with We Are LAFC, and is it in like the format? Is that like?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a story that goes back. I mean, really goes back to 1997, 98, which is Andy Thompson, who is Michael Thompson, the basketball player, his brother. And Andy Thompson is the uncle of Klay Thompson, and he was a producer at NBA Entertainment, and he saw the tea leaves basically, and that hey, there's this bizarre thing happening where the greatest dynasty in the history of basketball is going to implode, and they're going to choose to basically end the reign. And so he went to NBA Entertainment, which was headed at that time by a younger executive named Adam Silver. And so Adam Silver was the head of NBA Entertainment at the time. And they had this idea, hey, let's send our best team, our best shooters, our best producers, and embed with the Bulls for the year, because this promises to be this, remarkable season. And so they got this incredible access and captured, 500 hours of footage of that season, ending with Michael Jordan hitting the winning shot. I mean, like, what could be better? And so what you have to remember is that up until very, very recently, documentaries were a pathway to poverty. I mean, this was not something that people did, that people felt like, it was like, there was an educational component to it. Every now and again, like Michael Moore would, hit the zeitgeist with a project that would make some attention, but these are not money makers. And there was no outlet for them on television. And so I do think that, and in the sports realm, it was like, okay, no, we do highlight films. Leagues do highlight films. There's not storytelling like this. And so it's a long way of saying the tides changed, I think, first, number one, ESPN with the success of 30 for 30. And so now like, when people remember 30 for 30 started as an anniversary thing for ESPN, 30 films to mark 30 years of ESPN's existence. Now it's become a brand name for quality sports film. The same way, like you say Kleenex for tissues. It's like, it's a 30 for 30, and that happened. And then the streaming era, with the success of How to Make a Murderer and these, long form documentaries, showed there's a viable market for this. And then specific to sports, when the OJ series came out, by the way, in early 2016, it was like, oh, we can do a deep dive. So some market forces importantly changed. As for how we got into it, I had heard about this footage 20 years ago. I mean, this was considered sort of like this holy grail of footage. And I, of course, don't know how many times various people approached the Jordan team. It was a lot. Frank Marshall approached him. Danny DeVito approached him. There was a sort of temporary cut done years and years ago for a 1-hour film. But it was always like, how can you tell the story of Michael Jordan in the season in 1 hour? So,
and to be clear, both parties, the NBA and Jordan, had to sign off on it for this to be made.
So the deal that Adam Silver made with Michael Jordan was like, look, if you allow us to shoot this footage, we'll have an agreement that neither party can use the footage without the other one's consent. Yeah. And if nothing else, Michael, you'll have the greatest collection of home videos ever. Yeah. And so there it sat. And so we got wind of this. It's sort of the discussion started in earnest in early 2016. I remember we went to Toronto. I went to Toronto with Mike Tolan for the NBA All-Star Weekend. It was like the coldest I've ever been as a human. And we had sort of, had this discussions. Okay, we're going to meet with Curtis Polk and Esty Portnoy, who are, Michael's longtime partners and advisors, gatekeepers. And I was in the hotel lobby with Mike. And might have actually been Peter was with us. And then it was like, Mike went away with Curtis and Esty. I was like, okay, well, maybe we can get a meeting with Michael. So in that intervening 4 months, we created, a lookbook, a pitch book, and this was no ordinary lookbook. I mean, this was like an advertising quality deck. That we did different versions. We did a 6-episode. We did we settled on an 8-episode and a 10-episode version. And I think the one we sent to Michael, that Mike went to Charlotte, and it was a real kind of hastily arranged thing. We knew we needed to create the book. We didn't know exactly when Mike was going to go. And so he ended up going draft night of 2016. And, the deck was strong, if I can, say so myself. But
goes back to that Yale education.
Yeah. There were many people. We had a team that did it. But, I'm very involved especially in all of our writing materials. But the big part of it was Mike wrote a letter to Michael on on the front page that said, hey, every year interns come into our office and they only know you as a brand. They've never actually seen you play, and now it's time. And then I do think we benefited from the fact that in 2016 the Warriors were about to break they had broken the Bulls record for best season ever. And it was the original idea was, hey, let's get this on the air for 2018. It'll be 20 years from 98. We're in 2020 now. So it took, almost as long to get the deal done. We didn't really start doing production until early 2018.
Then you pushed it up, the release date, obviously, because everybody was in quarantine. How did that even happen? Were you guys still finishing the episodes as it was released?
Oh, yeah. So the crazy part was, as of, I call it the French infection, Wednesday, March 11th, when Rudy Gobert test positive, and then the whole NBA shuts down. And then Friday the 13th, and then that Monday, the 16th, we had about 6 episodes locked, more or less. 7 and 8 in pretty decent stages, 9, a little, 10 was not really done at all. But Jason, our director, who, he had done this unbelievable job of interviewing basically everyone. That Monday or Tuesday, we were scheduled to interview John Stockton in Spokane, Washington. And Jason asked me, he said, look, I can't go because I'm going to be, if I get stuck there. And so I was actually going to fly to Spokane to interview John Stockton. And then I spoke to my wife. And she said, wait a minute, you're going to go to Washington, the epicenter of the virus at that stage? And so that didn't happen. But I was prepared to go, but I thought better of it. I'm sort of glad in retrospect I didn't do it. But that's, to your point, I mean, that's how in the weeds we still were. And so it came about really quickly of like, okay, there already was a clamoring on social media to get the series out. But, it was a discussion that we were having amongst all the partners pretty much immediately. And it was really a math problem more than anything. It was like, okay, so many days. Yeah. And, the bigger thing was obviously on all the edits, all the editors were moved out of our post-production facility in New York. We had to copy. I mean, the tech geeks will understand this. We had to copy 80 terabytes of media 5 times to get to all the editors, so that every editor would have all the media, and then Jason coordinating, and we're dealing with licensing and all that kind of stuff. So it was it was crazy, but I think in a way having that deadline helped.
Do you think, going back to getting Michael Jordan on board, do you think that argument of kind of, in a way, and he's already relevant, his brand is crazy, but like making him relevant in this era, you think that pushed him over the edge to say yes?
The thing you see in the series, and I think maybe the best part of the project, is that, it isn't this, advertisement for how great Michael Jordan is all the time. I mean, there's some raw footage there. He is mean to Jerry Krause. He is harsh on Scotty Burrell, and I think until Michael was sufficiently out of the, spotlight, I think he, was like, what do I need to have people see me like that? They won't understand it. And if it's a 1-hour documentary or a 2-hour documentary, there's not going to be time for the context, and I'll just come off looking like a jerk. And I think that the scope of the project helped. And, as to Why exactly? I don't know. I just know he said yes. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's sort of, the big question is why now? But I think it's all of these factors. There's a market opportunity. There was a history opportunity, and the timing worked out really nicely.
And I think that as much as you might see that as a bad thing, that he's not shown in this light, I think everybody's kind of put it in context and really has that much more respect for him because of his competitive nature and his attitude towards his teammates, pushing them to a championship. So I thought it was just so interesting, and I appreciate each and every episode. I have my wife watching; she's interested in it,
right,
which says something, right? It's like universal just to see inside his reign, however many years, and like even people who aren't interested in sports are interested in Michael Jordan and how he did what he did. I don't know if Larry, you're going to ask another question. I'm interested also in, sorry, Larry, in who came up with the idea, and it might have been your director, of kind of time lapsing and going to these pods and these stories. That it's a brilliant idea, and always kind of coming back to that last season. How did that kind of unfold?
So I will say that is the most gratifying thing creatively. I mean, it's hard to say that because there's lots of things I love about it. But Jason is the architect of he did all the interviews and supervising the edit, chief creative force of this. But in terms of that architecture of using the season to ping pong back, that was the original vision that we put forth in the deck, is to say, we had not seen the footage. So we were sort of guessing. So it was like, okay, when they play the Pistons in 98, we'll jump back to a Pistons pod. And when they play like the Suns, we'll jump back into like the 93 finals or whatever. We would, just based on what we knew from like looking at the box scores, like here's when these things happen. So that was always part of the vision of, hey, we'll have a pod on the Knicks, we'll have a pod on the Bad Boys, we'll have a pod on Rod. They're basically, each guy gets their own episode almost. And one of my favorites, Steve Kerr, you'll see him in episode 9. And obviously, what we didn't know without looking at the footage was these little moments, like the security guard, and he goes like this when they're playing, either gambling in the locker room. Jon,
all the memes that have come of this,
all the little memes and all these little moments. Like I personally, I'm biased. I love all the episodes. I really do. I think though my favorites, and I love 10 now too, but 7 and 9. And I don't know if you guys have seen 7 yet, but I think it's a particularly powerful episode. And you see that end, it ends with Michael really getting emotional. That happened 45 minutes into the first interview.
Really?
So we interviewed him 3 times. And, Jason has a great story about this, because it's 45 minutes into the first interview. And Michael's asking for a break, and he's tearing up. And, what does that mean? Does that mean he's going to cut the whole thing? Or is it this is we're on a path to greatness? And, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said. It's Michael Jordan came to play in this project. And so if he comes to play in basketball, what does that mean? It means you win a championship. If he comes to play, it's a challenging project, something like this. A lot of chefs in the kitchen, a lot of pressure, etc. All great things, that can spur you to do well. It also can be stressful. But the thing that was constant throughout that is these interviews with Jordan. And you've never seen him that way. And there's a candor and a willingness to go there that, it's just hard to get in another format. And so that part is really special.
Anything else, Harvey?
No, that's amazing. Thank you for the insight. Are you surprised at how well it's been received?
Sure. I think I've said this. I think I may have even said this to Peter, or to Peter Guber. But you have some projects that are unfairly ignored or criticized.
Yeah,
they just don't get And you have some projects that are a little unfairly praised, they're not as good as everybody says they are. This one was never going to be ignored because it's Michael Jordan, but I do think it's being justifiably praised, and because I think it's informative, it's entertaining, it's illuminating in ways about things that you wouldn't know. But what no one could have predicted is obviously that we'd be landing like this and that it would like pop the zeitgeist. And I think that's because people actually have a chance to watch it. You know, there's so much on that. I think that the part that has surprised me is like these social media insanity about like little details like that we labeled
Barack Obama.
Yeah. You know, it's like that was really just a choice. It was like Jason was like, it makes sense because in the story we're telling, he was a former Chicago resident, but it became this like thing, you know. And so that part's been surprising.
I do want to say that I think coming up, because it was in a preview, possibly the funniest thing I've ever heard, and certainly the funniest thing that anyone says in this 10-part series without seeing the last 2 episodes is the notion that Reggie Miller, who wasn't even the best basketball player in his own family, suggests that the team that took the Bulls to 7 games during that last championship run because he pushed off in game 6 to get himself open for a shot, but that they were better than that Bulls team is so hysterical. I can't even believe the words came out of his mouth. But for me, as someone who lived in the city of Chicago at the time, was fortunate enough to walk into those buildings for some of those moments, there is a distinct similarity in the experience and the feeling that I have, when I walk into Banc of California Stadium, because in that era, you walked into that building and there was no expectation other than, Bulls are going to win tonight. You know, and it's just a question of what's Jordan going to do to get me up out of my chair? And when we walk into Banc of California Stadium, we expect that LAFC is going to win. And the question is, with all due respect to Harvey and the other guys,
how many goals is Carlos going to score?
Going to do this is going to get me up out of my chair.
I do the same thing.
Well, I mean, look, I compare it to. Again, I think growing up, I'm a little older than Jordan, but like I think growing up in LA as an LA sports fan in the 80s.
Amazing.
Was the greatest era ever. I mean, I think people in Boston can have an argument if you've grown up there now. If you're like if you've grown up in this era in Boston the last 15 years, tough argument to make. We had 5 Laker championships and 2 World Series championships, and the Raiders were here, and the Angels were good, and UCLA and USC, and the birth of the X Games culture, and all of these things happening, in a pretty, and the Olympics, all happening in LA. But it's sort of like I think of when I go to LA, when I go to the Banc of California Stadium, it's the best live sports experience that I've had. In other words, like there's on a consistent basis. I was lucky enough to go to, let's say, 4 or 5 Laker games a year all throughout the Showtime era. And when it was the playoff, there was an energy in the forum that was unlike anything. And, you had the cheesy Laker band and Lawrence Tantner on the PA and Dancing Barry, and there was like this energy to it. But it's kind of that same vibe, at the Banc, especially, I mean, pretty much every game, but there's like nothing in LA. There's nothing really in the United States like 3252. And that is like, we could come in, the closer entry is on the, southeast entry, but we always come in on the northeast entry, on the 3252 side, just because my kids love to see it when we come in. So it's awesome. And like, the way that the announcers announce all the players, and we have our own, like our little like family group in our section. It's fantastic.
What's next for you? What's in the works?
What's next is, there's another basketball project that I'm directing that I am not at liberty to say. It is an international basketball story with a strong American connection. Actually, it's more an American story with a strong international connection. But we're in the process of making 10 films with the International Olympic Committee. Basically a 30 for 30 series for great Olympic stories. They'll be on NBC and they'll be on the Olympic Channel platform and all the rights holding broadcasters. And we're finishing a 4-part documentary series on the Comedy Store, the history of the Comedy Store, the iconic comedic comedy club in Hollywood. for Showtime.
Yeah.
And, you know, got some various things, other things in the works. But, I mean, what's next is I really want to see you on the field. I really want to see some MLS and some soccer again.
Thank you for taking the time and sharing the insights on both We Are LAFC and The Last Dance, and getting into some of your background, flexing the Ivy League muscles, Zeitgeist twice, Jon, twice. And we have a little tradition here on Shootin' the Shot. We try to get a little musical flair to take us out, and started with Will Ferrell, did a little Dust in the Wind. Jordan and Carlos Vela did a duet on Suavemente.
Wow.
Our good friend Jaime Camille sang Stand By Me. Steve Nash did a brilliant, with Harvey accompanying on guitar, did a brilliant version of All Night Long, Lionel Richie, with a special vibrato trick. And having asked you a couple of the songs that you like to sing, I think maybe a chorus of Doctor My Eyes
okay.
would be fitting, my friend.
It would be. You have to tell me where, because I know the song really well, but I might have to look up some lyrics here. All right, so let me just look here. Okay, here. Let me get okay. Something like this. Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of fears without crying. Now I want to understand. And I have done all that I could to see the evil and the good without hiding. You must help me if you can. The doctor, my eyes.
Woo!
Tell me what is wrong. Was I unwise to leave them open for so long? How's that?
Outstanding, Jon Weinbach. Outstanding, man. You missed your calling.
But thank you guys.
Thanks, Jon. Be well, be safe.
Really appreciate your time, man. Thank you very much.
Anytime. Thanks so much.
See you soon.
You too.
I was like, man, I have like 10 more questions about Last Dance, but like, my favorite little interesting part was that was 45 minutes into the first interview, and Jordan like is that invested right off the bat. That's crazy.
Yeah. You know, the director at that point is thinking, yeah, that might be it.
Do you have any idea where a pacifier is?
I do not know where a pacifier is.